The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the small trading post, sending up clouds of red Arizona dust that caught the late afternoon sun. Margaret pressed her handkerchief against her swollen cheek, wincing at the tenderness beneath the fabric. She had been traveling for 3 weeks, each mile taking her further from Boston and the life that had nearly destroyed her. Through the dusty window she could see a man standing near the post, tall and still as the mountains behind him. This was Nathan Yazzie, the man whose carefully written letters had offered her an escape she desperately needed. She climbed down from the coach, her legs unsteady, her heart hammering against her ribs. Nathan stepped forward, his dark eyes taking in her appearance with a quiet intensity that made her want to disappear. She had sent him a photograph taken 2 years ago before everything fell apart, before James in his rage had marked her face and broken something fundamental inside her. Now she stood before this stranger, with bruises blooming purple and yellow across her cheekbone, her lip split and healing, looking nothing like the confident young woman in that picture. What happened next would change everything she believed about kindness and second chances. But before we continue, if this story is touching your heart, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you believe in stories of hope and redemption, subscribe to the channel because we share powerful stories like this every single day. Margaret waited for the anger, the rejection, the disgust. It was what she deserved for the deception. Instead, Nathan's expression softened with something that looked like understanding. He removed his hat, holding it respectfully against his chest. When he spoke, his voice was low and gentle, carrying an accent that blended English with something older, something that seemed to belong to this vast landscape. "Miss Margaret," he said, "you've had a long journey." It wasn't a question. His eyes met hers without flinching from the evidence written across her face. "My home is simple, but it's safe. You don't have to hide with me." Those words broke something loose inside her. Margaret had spent the entire journey rehearsing explanations, constructing elaborate stories about accidents and clumsiness. She had prepared for judgment, for being sent back in shame. She hadn't prepared for kindness. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them, hot and unstoppable. She covered her face with her hands, mortified by her weakness, terrified he would change his mind. She felt the lightest touch on her shoulder, barely there, asking permission rather than demanding. "Come," Nathan said quietly. "We'll take you home." Home was a sturdy adobe house nestled against a hillside where juniper trees provided shade and the air smelled of sage and earth. Inside it was cool and spare, with hand-woven rugs covering the packed earth floor and pottery vessels arranged on simple wooden shelves. Nathan showed her to a small room with a narrow bed and a window that looked out toward the distant mountains. He brought her water in a clay cup and told her to rest. Then he left her alone, closing the door softly behind him. Margaret lay on the bed and cried until she had nothing left. She cried for the girl she had been, the one who believed James when he said he loved her. She cried for the year she spent trapped in that Boston townhouse, isolated from her family, convinced she deserved every blow because she wasn't good enough, wasn't obedient enough, wasn't enough. She cried because a stranger had looked at her broken face and offered shelter instead of scorn. Over the following weeks, Nathan moved through the house like a quiet shadow, always present but never crowding. He never asked about her past, never pressed for explanations. Instead, he taught her the rhythm of this new life. He showed her how to grind corn using the metate and mano, the ancient stone tools his grandmother had used. He taught her which plants could heal and which could harm, walking with her through the desert morning after morning, pointing out the hidden life in what she had thought was empty wasteland. Margaret learned that Nathan was a man of the ND people, what others called Apache, though he rarely used that name himself. His family had survived wars and forced relocations, had endured attempts to erase everything they were. He had lost his first wife to fever 3 years ago, lost the child she carried with her. The loneliness had carved him hollow, he told her one evening as they watched the sun set in colors she had no names for. He had written to the marriage broker seeking not romance but simple companionship, someone to share the vast silence with. Now, you might be wondering what happens when two broken souls find each other in the middle of nowhere. Does healing really come from another person, or do we have to find it within ourselves? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I'd love to hear what you think about second chances and new beginnings. "I thought maybe we could be lonely together," he said with a small, sad smile. Maybe that would be less heavy than being lonely alone. She understood then that they were both survivors of different wars. His battles had left no visible scars, but she could see the weight he carried in the way he sometimes stared at the horizon as if seeing ghosts. Her battles had marked her face, but the deeper wounds were invisible, the ones that made her flinch at sudden movements, that woke her gasping in the night. Slowly, carefully, they built something neither had expected. Nathan never touched her beyond that first gentle hand on her shoulder, but his presence became a comfort rather than a threat. He laughed at her attempts to cook over the outdoor fire, then patiently showed her how to bank the coals and time the heat. She mended his shirts with the careful stitches her mother had taught her, and he carved her a beautiful wooden comb decorated with tiny birds. One morning, 4 months after her arrival, Margaret woke to find her face had healed completely. The bruises were gone, the split lip just a memory. She stood before the small mirror Nathan had hung for her and barely recognized the woman looking back. Her skin was brown from the sun, her hands strong from work. But more than that, her eyes had changed. The fear had faded, replaced by something steadier, something that looked almost like hope. She found Nathan outside, working leather for new moccasins. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. He didn't move away. Neither did she. "Thank you," she said simply. He looked at her, really looked at her, and she didn't feel the need to hide. "You saved yourself," he replied. "You were brave enough to leave. Brave enough to start again." Margaret reached out and took his hand, lacing her scarred fingers through his weathered ones. They sat together as the morning light spread across the desert. Two broken people who had found in each other not a cure but a companion for the healing. Sometimes salvation comes not with thunder but with whispered words in the dust. Sometimes home is not a place you return to, but a person who says you don't have to hide anymore, and means it with their whole heart. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that kindness still exists in this world, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Maybe they're struggling, maybe they're looking for hope, maybe they just need to know that broken things can still be beautiful. And don't forget to subscribe, because every story we tell here is about real human courage, real love, and real second chances. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing that tomorrow can be different than yesterday. See you in the next story.